What's up, nerds? Welcome back to another edition of Nate in the Mild. Since we're staying inside, taking it easy, being responsible adults, I figured we'd walk through some edit sessions. I posted this photo on my Instagram the other day. Nothing super fancy, it was just a photo I took of my girlfriend while we were out on a hike once. We happened to get really nice lighting, which obviously always helps. Then some clever editing sort of helped push it to where I thought it was a pretty cool photo, and I got a pretty enormous response to it. I had dozens of people asking me how my editing process worked for this photo, and honestly, on my in-person workshops, editing sessions are by far and away the most popular part, so I figured we'd do a little quick walkthrough of my editing. And something that's kind of cool, I'm actually going to drop this photo into the comments below. You can click the link to download it yourself if you want to give it a try. I would love to see some of your editing attempts on it as well.
I got everything you need.
Okay, so first things first, it is Instagram, so unfortunately we do have to hit it with that 4:5 crop ratio right out of the gate. There is no way around that, although I wish there was. I always feel a little bit silly when my first move editing is to crop it to that silly 4:5 vertical rectangle, but you know, that's how it goes. We are subservient to the system, as they say. Okay, so I personally like the rule of thirds line right on this horizon here. It just kind of helps draw the eye through the frame. We have a third of the frame down here is going to be the ground, then the middle third is going to be her torso and some nice light rays, and then the top up here is pretty much forest. So that gives us a nice even balance. Okay, so right off the bat, I should mention that I did underexpose this fairly significantly. That's on purpose because I like to try and preserve these highlights, especially when we're talking about something like light rays. These light rays coming through the trees, if they're blown out, you're going to lose them forever. So it seems silly to start an edit by raising the exposure about 1.5 stops. But if we had shot it like this, all of this white is just white. That information is gone. However, by shooting it underexposed, then that lighting is still preserved there, even though I can bring all of this up. So I bring my exposure up a tad, and then as silly as it sounds, I'm gonna actually bring my highlights down about -50 or 60. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, but now we end up with properly exposed highlights here that aren't blown out. I'm gonna do the same thing to the shadows, just to give everything kind of nice and even. And then we're gonna bring a little bit of contrast back into this here. That's a little bit extreme. Let's not go crazy here, right? All right, so that already starting to look good. So you can see pretty small edit difference, but we're getting somewhere. So if you've seen my photos, you know that obviously I like colors. So we're gonna dive into that. We're gonna add some vibrance and some saturation. Some people go really subtle on this. They like to be gentle with it, and I understand if that's the case for you. For me, I like colors and I'm not scared of them. I'm not into that washed out look, so I'm just going to completely unabashedly give this some vibrance and some saturation. I don't personally think that looks blown out, but of course this is an art, so take a shot at it, see what you think. If you like it less saturated, good on you. Okay, I think that the shadows are up a little bit too high, but I don't want to bring them back down necessarily. I just want to give it a little more punch. So I'm going to bring the blacks back down about 10 to 15-ish. That's good enough for now. I do love to hit the slash key to sort of soft proof and see where I came from. It's just kind of a fun way to check your progress, see if you've gone too far overboard, of course. Now, something that I do like for almost every photo, I'm going to enable this profile correction just so we're not dealing with any weird built-in lens artifacts. But that removes a lot of the vignette, which is one of my favorite parts of nice photos with lighting like this. So I'm going to add a little bit back in. Once again, is that a little bit too much? I think that looks pretty nice. What do you think? Alrighty. So from here, the thing that I think is the most interesting still are these light rays, and they don't quite pop the way I want. This is already a really nice ethereal forest scene, but I think these light rays need a little more detail, a little bit more pop to them. So I'm going to add a radial filter. Now on the radial filter here, I'm going to bring the yellows up. I want to warm this up quite a bit. I think that's a pretty important part of it. And then I am going to give it a little bit of clarity. And so for what that's worth, the clarity kind of brings out the punch for things like light rays. It's something that I'm always gentle with. You never want to go overboard with clarity. It's one of the worst looking things you can imagine if you do it too far, but it really brings out light rays beautifully. So I'm going to add this radial filter here. I think it looks a little bit aggressive, so I'm going to add some feathering. And so what feathering does is it just softens the edges around any filter, brush, etc. If you have it at 0, you can see it basically makes a sharp line. That's about the weirdest look you can imagine. So I'm going to pretty much crank that all the way up. I want this as soft as can be. And I'm going to make this a nice big radial filter. And the reasoning for that is that small radial filters, you can see the line. It looks artificial. Over here, it's warm and delicious, and over here looks kind of cold and sterile. So by making it huge, you're not necessarily affecting more of the photo as much as you are softening that transition so that it looks a little bit more natural, the way that the lighting drops off into the background. So I think this looks pretty nice. From where we started to where we are now, not so bad. One last thing that I think this needs is to adjust the greens a little bit. You see with the warmth that I added, they look a little bit yellow for me. So I'm going to go down into this HSL color tab and I'm going to change the hue, bring it up just about 20. And that seems subtle again, but look at the color on these ferns. It looks like a nice, rich, real forest color, right? So you take it off and they get that kind of yellowish, but you bring it back on and they look real. It looks good, right? Okay, so from there, we're gonna add just the final last step to this, and that is a little bit of the Orton effect. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Orton effect, it was pioneered by a photographer named Michael Orton in the mid-1980s. It's a really cool technique where you add a little bit of blur and extra contrast overlaid on this photo. And what it'll do is give it kind of a dream-like, sort of a fairy tale, ethereal effect. It's really cool when done properly, but it's really easy to go overboard. So we're gonna jump into this one and see if we can make it work. And if you do it right, it's exactly the cherry on top that you want. So Command E in Adobe Lightroom to open this in Photoshop. And thanks to the magic of tethering like that, it opens with all of our edits applied. Honestly, looks pretty good. I'm happy with it as is, but this will be exactly what we need to push it over the top, I think. So first off, we're gonna copy this layer. We're making all of our edits to the top layer because, as I said, it's sort of an overlay. Click Filter, go into Blur, and then down to Gaussian Blur. This basically just adds a little bit of a fuzz between all of your pixels. A general rule of thumb when doing the Orton effect is that you want your Gaussian blur to be more or less equivalent to the resolution of the sensor you took the photo on. I shot this on an A7R III, so I'm gonna be around 40 to 42 megapixels, and so 40 to 42-ish pixels of blur on my Gaussian blur. You can see if we go way higher, it blurs it all the way out, and if it goes way lower, there's almost no visible blur at all. So sticking around the resolution of your sensor is a great way to be. Once that's applied, we're gonna go to Image, Adjustments, and adjust the levels. This is gonna start to look pretty weird here as I bring the black side and the white side of these all the way towards the center. Now that looks really aggressive, but I wanna remind you that we are going to reduce the saturation, we are going to reduce the opacity. Click OK. This looks like a nightmare. I kind of hate it, but let's slam that opacity all the way back down. Let our eyes adjust. You don't want to be looking at that super aggressive one, right? Bring this up 10 or 15%. It's subtle, it's small. Oh yeah, that's good. Now we can look, if you toggle this on and off, that's not so bad, right? That adds just a hint of this little dream-like etherealness that we like. Now, the main thing for me here is that I don't want this softness as much on her as I do on the fairy tale dreamlike light rays in the background. So we're gonna add just a soft adjustment layer on there, and we're going to erase. Now, make this eraser very big. I go kind of low opacity so that I don't do anything crazy here, and then have the hardness as low as possible so there's no distinct edges between anywhere you erase. But then I'm going to just subtly remove some of the Orton effect from the stuff here in the foreground where I want those textures. There we go. And then that looks good to me. We've softened it up just enough. You can see that she still is sharp thanks to erasing some of the Orton effect off of her. But we still have this really cool ethereal dream fairy tale look in the background. I think it's good. Command S to save those edits back into Lightroom. And that's it. 5-10 minutes in Lightroom, a little bit of Photoshop, and this photo's ready to go. Download the file I have below and feel free to play around with it. You don't have to follow these steps exactly, but I would love to see some of your edits and see what you guys do with it. Shoot me a message once you have it all edited up, and maybe I'll do a review in the future and see how some of you all edited this photo. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, etc. I've been Nateinthewild, Nate in the Mild, Lockdown Edition. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.